And Brics comes into the arena and are asking fundamental questions. They are saying, for how long shall we be dominated by Europe and America? For how long shall we have our banking system being dictated to by these institutions? For how long will we have the dollar as the dominant country? For how long shall we have SWIFT as the medium of transfer of money, or IBAN as the medium of transfer of money?
This is the journey to one Africa.
Brics, as we now know, is a club, for want of a better term, that has brought together major emerging economies. And you are talking about Brazil, you are talking about Russia, you are talking about China, you are talking about India, and you are talking about South Africa. Those were the anchors of Brics. And the creation of Brics is a reaction to what one may describe as the dominance of Eurocentric and Americocentric institutions, whose greatest claim to fame is that they dominate international politics and economics. In the economic arena, they are the major anchors of institutions such as the World Bank, the IMF, and the WTO organizations. And it is not lost on me that these Bretton Woods institutions were created in 1944, and although we claim that other members, other countries are members, they are grafted members. These are Eurocentric and Americocentric institutions. And Brics comes into the arena and are asking fundamental questions. They are saying, for how long shall we be dominated by Europe and America? For how long shall we have our banking system being dictated to by these institutions? For how long will we have the dollar as the dominant country? For how long shall we have SWIFT as the medium of transfer of money, or IBAN as the medium of transfer of money? We who are emerging economies, and look at India, with a population in excess of 1.5 billion. Look at China, with a population in excess of 1.3 billion. Look at Russia, with a population in excess of 100 million. Look at Brazil, with a population in excess of 150 million. Look at South Africa, with a population in excess of 70 million. They are saying on a head count, we represent the largest population in the whole world. And it is through organization that we are going to participate meaningfully in the international economic and political arena. So one must understand Brics in that way. And that is why Brics is also opening up to other countries. And at the recent meeting between the 22nd and 24th days of October 2024 in Kazan in Russia, 13 additional countries were invited and are going through the process of joining the Brics, and there are others who have appetite to join. So Brics is an answer to what has hitherto been dominant Western institutions. The fact that leaders of major countries in the world appeared in Kazan in Russia is a statement. a statement that we will not allow anything to stand in our journey towards being effective in our participation in world economics. That is why you saw Modi of India, Xi Jinping of China, Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, and indeed many other leaders present saying, we are coming, come rain or shine, because we believe that there is an agenda that is worth pursuing, and we are not going to allow ourselves to be diverted. So it was a very strong statement, and for the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, it was also a statement with major political implications that I am not as isolated as the West wants me to be, that I'm a player in the world. You cannot ignore Russia, you cannot ignore emerging economies. So it is significant, and the optics are telling. I'm sure there is no shortage of people in Europe and America who were annoyed by the sheer numbers that were present in Kazan. You know, Prime Minister and Guterres, who is the Secretary General of the United Nations, really has had to attend. I mean, you are talking about countries that in terms of population constitute more than 70% of the world population. And they are talking economics. You cannot ignore them. It is not lost on me that after that meeting, he was not welcome in Kiev because they thought that he had done a bad thing. But I think the United Nations is a body that really should be blind to all these temporal differences that have generated war. So a statement was being made, and I have no doubt in my mind that in Europe and America, eyes are being raised. And of course, the question of de-dollarization did not arise as prominently as one thought it would, but alternative payment systems are already being discussed. Countries are already saying that for too long, we have allowed our systems and our countries to be dollar dependent, that the time is now to begin to think differently, so that even if you don't talk about de-dollarizing international economic systems, movements are beginning to emerge, which suggests that in the next 10 to 20 years, there will be competition to the United States dollars in a manner that has not been seen since 1972. When you see countries such as Turkey, and it must not be lost on us that Turkey has been a candidate to join the EU for a very long time and has never been admitted as a full-blooded member of the EU. And Turkey is also an emerging economy. If you look at many countries in the world now, you are beginning to see quite a number of Turkish organizations, both militarily and otherwise. And President Erdogan of Turkey is saying, well, I go where I'm welcome. So these are major statements, and Europe, in my view, is declining, and you can see Western Europe is declining, and you can see the kind of frustration that emanates from rhetoric in the United Kingdom, from France. I think the Germans are a little bit more careful, but that tells you that there is a new game in town. And those who are playing that game are to be found in the Brics. For the first time since 1945, there is really serious group of people who are not just talking politics. You may have ignored the non-aligned movement, which was created at the behest of Tito, Nasa, Nkrumah, and Sukarno. But this is new. They are talking economics. They are challenging the petrodollar. They are saying we are there and we cannot be ignored. We are emerging economies. And in the next few years, we will have displaced some of the old players. So that new game in town is not a small game. It is a serious game. And nobody wants to be left out. Hence the appetite of countries that say we want to be counted in. And the numbers will increase. You know, I've always seen President Erdogan of Turkey as one who wants to be the new Atatürk, the founder of modern-day Turkey. And if one sees the number of years that they have had to wait to join the EU, and if one sees how sometimes they are treated within NATO, then one can understand why President Erdogan and therefore Turkey are saying, we are going to the Brics. Is a way of saying, if you don't want us, there are people who want us and are prepared to embrace us, and is sending a clear message to NATO and to the European Union. How they react to that is something that we will wait and see. I'm sure there are those who will want to say, let us not lose Turkey. Let us admit him into the European membership quickly, and let us also make them feel that they are a part of NATO in a meaningful way. This is the kind of thing you say, let us wait and see how Turkey is treated. There will be pushback, particularly when you begin to hear the Brics talking about different payment systems. Remember that almost anything between 80 and 90% of world trade is dominated on the basis of US dollars. If you are to reduce that even by 40%, the impact that it would have on the economy of the United States of America is monumental. So there's going to be pushback. There are going to be attempts at enticing countries in Asia and in Africa not to be a part of Brics, because it poses real danger, which could torpedo certain things that hitherto have been taken for granted. So there is going to be pushback. There is going to be pushback from the United States of America. There is going to be pushback from Western Europe. There is going to be pushback from EU in its organized sense. There is going to be pushback from individual EU countries such as France, Italy, and the United Kingdom. And I'm already beginning to see that. I'm beginning to see a UK which post-Brexit is trying to engage members of the Commonwealth a lot more intimately. I'm beginning to see France beginning to engage the other African countries a lot more intimately. And it's lost on me that as I speak now, you have as the Secretary General of La Francophonie a lady from Rwanda, and the newly elected Secretary General of the Commonwealth is from Ghana. These are subtle messages trying to tell Africa, please be with us. So there is going to be pushback. You know, this is something that must be said, because from where I sit, it represents the truth. There is a sense in which Russia, for historical reasons, attracts sympathy, the circumstances of the war notwithstanding. And the reason is not far to seek. As regards Africa, the former Soviet Union was very present in the struggle to regain independence within several African countries. And at that time, of course, Ukraine was also a part of the larger Soviet Union. And secondly, it is important to remind ourselves that the Russian-Ukrainian war is now being seen as Western Europe against Russia. And for that reason, the people look at Russia in that regard as the underdog, against whom all these countries have ganged up in order to destroy. And for that reason, they also enjoy some sympathy. And thirdly, remember that Russia is a country that cannot be ignored in terms of technology. They are technologically very advanced. They are military power that cannot be ignored. And even as we speak now, in quite a number of African countries specifically, you'll find the Russians are actually the protectors of some of these regimes. And we have seen that in the Sahel, where the Russians have been very present. I know it is for their own benefit, but it is important to note that when people are in distress, they look for help from those who are willing to help. But I've always said that every country, every people have a reason to define what is in their best interest, and sustainable relationship must be mutually beneficial. So that is the reason why I think people are quick to go to Kazan, but they are very slow to respond to Kiev, which is seen as a lapdog of America and the West. Brics affords African nations an opportunity to liberate themselves economically. Why do I say so? I say so because the engagements that we have had as a continent with Europe in the early days of African, Caribbean, Pacific, in the old European arrangements, most of those arrangements, financial and otherwise, have been parasitic. They have not helped Africa in a meaningful way. The engagements that we have had with institutions which are Western-based and which African countries have token memberships, such as the World Bank or the IMF, have not been beneficial. We will remember the structural adjustment programs in 1980s, from which many African countries have not recovered. All these are bad memories, and I think it is Zambia's Dambisa Moyo in her book Dead Aid who is able to demonstrate to us how those relationships have affected Africa negatively. And another person who demonstrated very ably is the South Korean economist Ha-Joon Chung in his book The Bad Samaritans. So these bad Samaritans have harmed Africa, and for that reason African countries are saying, but this new thing called Brics, perhaps it is the savior, perhaps it is the Noah's Ark that will save us from the flood that has been occasioned by these Western institutions. Whether that is what will happen is a different debate, but that, in my view, is part of the attraction of Brics, because they are saying you will participate, you will not be dictated to, and your participation will be meaningful, and you will be people with a real voice in decision making. That is the attraction. And I see many African countries joining Brics. In the conflict involving Russia and essentially NATO, there are too many moving parts. And to hazard a prediction is a dangerous thing. But one can speculate that if peace is brokered, and it must be brokered, it will be fragile peace. It will be fragile, and it will be informed by mutual suspicion for a very long time. In other words, it may be the kind of thing that at one time existed between the Soviet Union and Western Europe, dit-on. In other words, you will have peace because it is beneficial to everybody, not because you want it, because you do not want to be in a state of perpetual war. So that dit-on is going to ensure that engagements are structured. It is going to ensure that we open up trade. It is going to ensure that you eliminate sanctions, because sanctions hurt everybody. And to the extent that you want to make economies vibrant within Europe, in the United States, in Asia, in Africa, and in the Pacific, it is going to be important that something is brokered sooner rather than later. But the truth is, these suspicions will going to remain alive for a very long time. And in fact, I dare say, the United Nations has reached a stage where it is in the same state as the League of Nations. As the League of Nations was leading to the reform and the creation of the United Nations in 1945, the time has now come that the United Nations must actually be re-examined. The question of permanent membership with veto powers, these are things that are already being re-examined. I hope that the world will be bold enough to say, let us rethink the United Nations and let us create another organization, perhaps not create, but let us revamp the UN in a manner that will speak to the world, in a manner that is sensitive to what will happen in the next 50 years. And that must be done. We have seen how the United Nations is ignored by a number of countries. The resolutions that are made are ignored, and it has become a weak organization which really must be given some steroids. And those steroids really must be in the form of fundamental reforms, and the sooner, the better.